Employee engagement isn't a new thing. What is different about purposeful engagement?
When most people think about employee engagement, they tend to think about the employee opinion survey that happens once a year or every 2 years. That's actually finding out information about what's going on in the organisation, and it's engagement to a point. But what we're trying to stress in the book is that there should be engagement around the purpose of the organisation. And this needs to be embedded into the systems and processes of the organisation so that everybody can see how their purpose fits with that of the organisation.
In your book, you actually talk a lot about cellular biology and fractal mathematics, which is hardly the language of corporations. Why is this?
Well, there's a bit of a science lesson in the book, and let me start with cellular biology. It's interesting to note, and one of the things that I discovered while I was doing my research is that there's a lot of similarities between single cell organisms and us as human beings and organisations. And so in a nutshell, if you think about it, when cells came together to form beings, they were originally all doing exactly the same tasks and coming together, clustering because of some security in numbers. But then over the course of millions of years, these cells learnt to share tasks. And there's something similar going on with organisations about how people share tasks in teams. Not only do they share tasks, but they remember how they've shared tasks and kind of embed that in their DNA so that they become more and more efficient. And if you think about it, we're actually a community of 70 trillion cells living in a community that is us, that is me. And actually, we can learn an awful lot from cellular biology to make our organisations more efficient, so that organisations can have that kind of shared purpose and also that opportunity to share tasks in an efficient manner to deliver what the organisation is all about. There's a lot more in the book, but essentially we can learn an awful lot from looking at cells. The other thing that I mention in the book is fractals. And interestingly, fractals are really important when you're looking at big global corporations because they seem so complex. And yet actually, if you were to zoom in and out of an organisation, you'd see similar things happening at different levels. And that's the nature of fractal. It's basically self-similarity, repeating patterns that you see no matter how close or how far away you're looking at it. So for example, if you were to take the information, the results that we measure and the information that we share in an organisation, you can't have it that in the boardroom all that detail that is going on at the sharp end is being put on the desk on the boardroom table. It's just not going to work. We'd get bogged down in the detail. But there has to be a similar level of detail whether we're looking at it from that level or below. So actually we can learn from the theory of fractal mathematics to understand that we need to have the same sort of detail, the same sort of structures playing out no matter how high and low we are in the organisation.
You also talk about establishing a learning ecosystem. What's that all about?
A learning ecosystem is basically saying that if you think of an organisation as a living organism, then learning has to occur, and particularly with large complex organisations, we've got to do something within that organisation to make sure that we don't keep reinventing the wheel, that we don't waste our energy doing things in different ways in different parts of the world, and capitalise on all the learning that has gone on. So it's basically about consciously creating a learning ecosystem. And at Primeast, we've got an acronym that we call ELAS, which basically stands for Engage, Learn, Apply and Sustain. And if you think about that, if you engage with people or with some learning, you've then got to think about how you actually apply that in the workplace and then sustain it. So let me give you 3 examples of a learning ecosystem at work at different levels. So at the most basic level, if I was to give you a book to read, you would probably read it chapter to chapter. If you're anything like me, then put it on the shelf and do nothing as a result of it. But if we're conscious about learning, then as we read each chapter, we'll think, what are the messages for me? How can we apply that learning? How can we make it sustainable? We'll probably share that learning with our colleagues, and the organisation will benefit much more because of it. So that's kind of the most basic level in terms of reading a book. So let's think about a common problem in organisations: too much email. So you get somebody who is having problems because they've got too much email coming through their PC, and they go and see a colleague who they know is good at managing this. And they sit down and they talk about how to look at these things, how to file emails effectively, how to get emails put to junk or whatever it is. They learn a few tips and then they go away and they apply that. But not only do they do that, they also arrange to meet their colleague a month later to see how they're getting on. Maybe they've managed to make some things work, but they're struggling with other things. And by that constant reference back to the learning, they can actually make improvements. So if you take that kind of engage, learn, apply, sustain concept right up to the organisational level, and you think about the learning and development curriculum of an organisation, how does that work? Well, first of all, let's make sure that the learning supports the purpose, and there are ways of doing that. And then also make sure that people arrive, for example, on a training course, having had engagement with their manager to understand the challenges they face, what they're already good at in this subject. They attend the training course, if it is a training course, and then they go back and they make sure that they apply it. The organisation can put structures in place so that the manager engages with them and asks the learner what they're doing about the learning that they've made, and then maybe a year later checks back in to say how has that learning been sustained, what benefits have been made, and just making sure that the whole thing becomes a cycle of continuous improvement.